Thanks very much for staying with us. And we have Honorable Fuseni Issa, former MP for Okaikwe North, with us in the studio, as well as the Honorable Alasan S. Suhini with us. He's the MP for Tamale North. So this week has seen the running debate about the state of our credit ratings on the global scene through Standards & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch. Those are the well-known credit ratings agencies, and there are others as well. And usually the ratings give an indication of how well a country is doing economically. It gives you access to the international financial markets. But what has led on since that debate is now there seems to be a debate about what the state of our economy is and whether things are so bad that we need to go into an IMF program. But for those of you not very familiar with the credit ratings, let me just bring that to you. And in terms of Moody's, they downgraded us to C, AAA1 or C AAA1. And when it comes to S&P, we are at a B minus. And then I think Fitch puts us also at a B. And those issues have been, major discussions this week. There's also concern that the government doesn't want to go back to the IMF. And Ken Oforiatta did mention that there's no way we're going back. Let me start with Honorable Suhini. Former President Mahama issued a statement where he urged the government to rethink its position and go back into an IMF program. We all know the implications of going into an IMF program. They will ask you to cut expenditure. They will ask you to probably freeze employment because they will say the public sector is bloated and too big. And then there will also be implications on what projects that you are able to do. Why would former President Mahama want the current government to go back to these very harsh conditionalities? We saw what it did during the Mahama administration.
Jiva, it's not entirely accurate that the IMF slap very harsh conditions when states subscribe to their programs. And to be fair, our economy benefited greatly from the last IMF program that we entered into. Remember, we had some liquidity challenges somewhere around 2013, 2014, when we implemented a single spine salary structure and did not anticipate that it was going to affect revenues as much as it did. Unfortunately, the effect of that implementation came home to hit hard around 2013, 2014. And unfortunately also around that time, cocoa prices had gone down. Oil prices had shot up beyond even government projections. And so the nation was, badly hit. And that is when President Mahama spoke of how, as a nation, because especially of the single spine salary structure, we had eaten all the meat and left with the bones. And there was a need for us to sit around the table and discuss how to come out of it, because a single spine salary structure ensured that in some cases workers got double, the increase. The increment was double their original salaries. And so he said, we have all eaten this to the bone. And GDP, debt to GDP was, revenue, was now, salaries and others were now taking about 70% of the revenue that we were raising. And so he had to call the Senchi consensus. Now, at the Senchi consensus, we came out with what was known as homegrown policies. It was these homegrown policies. The Senchi consensus, however, was boycotted by the New Patriotic Party. The only New Patriotic member of parliament who attended, Mr. Kwame Mpianim, up till to date, is being punished by the party for attended that conference. But the good thing that came out of that program is that what we developed as our homegrown solutions, what we sat around the table and decided that this is how we're going to come out of the problem was what was presented to the IMF. And that is where President Mahama said we were going to them for policy credibility. If you recall, the IMF did not even support us beyond 1 billion. I think it was 900 and something million, Ghana cedis at the time. Because our reputation as a country and the economy had been battered, also thanks to the opposition at the time, that investors and others did not find us attractive. And so we needed a program that the IMF will oversee. And once the IMF was overseeing it, it gave investors and other, interested parties the confidence to deal with us. And so it was our own program that the IMF adapted. So it's not always the IMF imposing sanctions that are not impactful. And it is based on that experience that President Mahama says, look, I have been where you are. I got out of it. Unfortunately, you have wasted the windfall that I left behind as a result of the gains from the IMF. But you can also do same by calling a round table discussion, adapt the programs that we can all buy in, and then perhaps engage the IMF for us to come out again. Because look, from 2014 to about 2016, when we started implementing these programs, by 2016, all the international agency ratings had improved. And they were showing stability and all of that.
They kept giving a positive outlook.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there were projections, for example, from the EIU, from IMF, from the World Bank, that by 2017 our economy was going to grow by about 8% to GDP. I mean, so when the NPP took over in 2017 and posted a GDP growth of about 7.8%, it is entirely wrong to assume that it was as a result of their magical performance. It is fair, however, to say that when they came, they maintained, some of the programs that they inherited. And yes, there's evidence to show that they did, because at the time we were supposed to exit the IMF, we did it. They extended it because they saw the good in it. And so they extended it. And by that extension and by that cooperation, they were able to post 7.8, even though it fell shy of the 8% that was predicted by 2016.
But let me ask you,
yes,
in saying all of these, are these ratings agencies, do they really do us a favor? Or, should we rely on what ratings they give us? The president has criticized this, and he did this while at the AU meeting in Addis Ababa. It raises the question of bias, it raises the question of fairness, because there's a view that Brazil could even borrow, and we know other countries in Latin America where the economy is in dire straits, like even Argentina, which tends to default on its debts. They get better, interest than we do.
Well, when I heard the president and some other members of government talk of bias and started arguing with the rating agencies, one thing came to mind, that when the fundamentals are weak, you argue with rating agencies.
Oh, but if the agency has got it wrong, nothing precludes you from putting your case forward. And I think
I'll get there.
I think it was.
I'm just talking about what came to mind. That when the fundamentals are weak, you argue with rating agencies. And you see, it also reminded me of a banter on different platforms, though, that President Mahama, when he was president, had with Dr. Baumia over, I think it was a Moody's rating of B with a positive outlook. And Dr. Baumia at the time harped on it and said it was a downgrade. And when President Mahama came back and said, yes, it may be B, but the outlook is positive, and so that is a good thing, he said, no, it is negative and it's bad. I don't know if you remember this.
I do. I've seen the video recently, because your team of archivists has been circulating it.
If the champion of rating agencies, even when he misinterprets it to make Ghana look bad in the quest of seeking power, gets to have power and begins to argue with those rating agencies when they rate him poorly, You can only say that when the fundamentals are weak. You argue with rating agencies.
Oh, but Honorable Suhini,
No,
that's unfair.
How is it unfair, Jifa?
Because if I look at what I'm doing and I see that things are looking up and you give me a negative read, I have every right to come back and put the issues before you and say that probably you got it wrong. And I think it was Standard & Poor's that reviewed this.
Mind you, Jifa, we actually subscribe to these agencies. They don't impose their ratings on us. We actually pay dues to them.
So should we stop?
No, listen. It is a discussion we can have on another platform. But first of all, we must expose the double standards and hypocrisy in all of this among ourselves. Then we can now determine
whether we want to keep going with them. Okay.
But until then, it is unfair to use different yardsticks. Because here you were, trumpeting their ratings against your opponent. And even when it didn't look that bad, you suggested it was that bad. And all of a sudden, when those same agencies you still have subscribed to and maintained relationship with rate you poorly and have basis to do so, you turn around. Because why? At the time that these ratings were, this discussion was conducted around the ratings, our debt to GDP was less than 70%. It was less than 70%. Today we are talking about 80% plus. So, it is clear to us that the conditions have worsened.
Okay, so let me
wait a minute.
Okay.
Just hold
a minute. Okay, final point.
Yes, final point.
If you're a rating agency, you do a very poor job.
I know it is not debt to GDP alone that is used in doing the ratings, but I'm just telling you that at that point, at the time, that is just one of the
various matrices that are used. Just one. They also look at what do you call it? Your ability to mobilize revenue.
Fantastic.
They also look at the futuristic outlook in terms of what you are delivering.
And that is why some of us believe that if the NPP had maintained, the structure of the economy that they inherited, which had them to post 7-point-something growth to GDP, we would not have been where we are today. But
okay,
they behave. Let me end the sentence. They behaved like the child whose father works so hard to accumulate wealth and then wills it to him. And he goes to town partying with Kenke and others and flying in expensive jets. And when the wealth is finished, he comes to the family members to contribute so that he can continue to enjoy the wealth the father left for him.
Let me make it clear to Alaji that the structure that the NPP inherited in 2017 was unsustainable. We inherited an economy where
Honorable Suhini, please just allow him.
We inherited an economy where 3 line items took all our revenues.
Which are these line items?
Public sector wage. Our debt, servicing, and then transfer to statutory.
Okay. And at the time,
it wasn't
just to be clear, at the time, the Mahama administration had borrowed just about 100 and something billion.
I'm saying that.
It is true. And they had just borrowed about 100 and something billion.
122 billion.
Yes, so they had done that.
Billion.
But then, for clarity,
they started off from 9.8 billion.
Okay, but then
they
provided you.
They started off from 9.8 billion in 2009.
All right, but at least by that time they had borrowed the 122 billion.
Yeah,
they left funds in the sinking.
That had grown about 1,300.
They left you funds in the sinking fund, funds in the Ghana Infrastructure Fund, funds in the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. ESLA. Okay, so now you can proceed.
And
I just wanted to.
We left them 2 oil wells.
Okay, I don't want to go too much into the oil wells because
I am saying
the reason I don't want to go too much into oil is because I have a slight bit of knowledge in that area, and oil prices have significantly dropped even though we had projected. So, Honorable Issa, please proceed.
That is still extra revenue.
Honorable Issa, please proceed. Honorable Issa, please proceed. Please proceed.
When the fundamentals
I started by making the point that the economy we inherited was not sustainable. We inherited an economy that was growing at 3.4%. You can say that, yes, we extended the IMF program that we inherited. Why? Because all the benchmarks that we were supposed to meet as a nation, we did not meet. So we needed another year to be able to get back on track before we could exit the program. That was the main reason why we extended it, not because of some magic that we're going to get. Why did we go to the IMF? What? They keep saying policy credibility and also get some money from the IMF. How different is that? We have learned over time. These things are cyclical. They are economic cycles that will happen. And today I'm hearing that my brother is attributing it to the single spine salary structure. Yes, it's true. It put a bit of pressure on our physicals, on our physicals. But in the past couple of days, the finance minister has made a statement, which is emphatic. We say, I can tell you that we are not going back to the IMF, and we won't go back to the IMF. Isn't
it because if you go back, you would have been deemed to have failed? The
narrative
will look bad.
Not because we would have been deemed. We know what our challenges are. And it will come back to hurt us. We know what our challenges are. And that is what we seek to fix today. Those rating agencies, what do? They gather information, principally for lenders. So they give lenders information about the risk level that you take in getting into transactions with sovereign nations like ourselves. Not just nations, even some companies have their ratings. So when you rate MTN at a certain, anybody lending to MTN will look at the risk-return ratio, because with a higher risk, they tend to require a higher return to make up for the risk that they are taking. Principally, that's what the rating agencies do. And these rating agencies, how do they rate sovereign nations or companies? By getting information. And most of the time, they get to this information either from third parties, like us. After we publish our budget, all those rating agencies have access to them. They see, they glean through our budget, and they come to a conclusion. They will engage us in whatever misunderstanding or clarity they need in some of these policy documents, and that is how the rating agencies work. So it is not out of place for us to engage them when we think that there is some report or some rating that is not reflective of what is actually happening in our economy. It is not out of place. And nobody should quote the president saying that at the AU. No, he spoke within a context. The president at the AU was speaking about promoting financial services within the AU and on the African continent. Why? Because the AU is moving towards establishing a central bank, a common stock exchange, a monetary fund, and all of that. And so the president's call at the AU was that, look, if we are looking at establishing these institutions within the AU on the continent, why don't we make use of certain resources that the World Bank gives to IMF to disperse to our economies? The SDRs, we call them. If we get the SDRs here, it will make the process of us establishing these institutions within the AU on the continent faster. That was what the president was saying. He did not go to the extent of challenging these agencies.
Oh, but he says, fellow colleagues, we must look at what the rating agencies give us, because it inevitably, in some instances, harms some economies which have been downgraded and then given blocked access to the international financial market. If that's not a criticism of the ratings agencies, then I don't know.
If the AU had a central bank, if the AU had a military fund, if the AU had an investment bank, if the AU had a common stock exchange, I think that these ratings and the finances within ourselves will go. And I know nobody should doubt that it's going to be fairer amongst ourselves than with the other ones. What do Moody's, Fitch, and S&P do? They basically work in the interest of the lenders. And remember, the lenders do pay them. I am not here to criticize them.
Oh, but yeah, I didn't know that we also subscribe to them. So if we are also subscribing to them, then
of course,
then it justifies why the Ministry of Finance issued those two statements a week ago.
You might term it as a criticism, but I would term it as engagement.
Okay.
Because you need to engage them. You might read the budget and see something.
But if you are not happy, but if a country,
and so I will have to come to clarify whatever you are putting out there.
The point.
So there's nothing untoward, and these things happen.
Yeah, I'm not saying that there's anything untoward, but I think The question maybe many are now asking is, if our international capacity or our capacity to access funds internationally is dependent on the ratings agencies, then we should be able to criticize them if we feel that they've gone out of step. We should be able to demonstrate to them that probably they got it wrong.
And I think one of them say criticize. I will say engage.
You will say engage.
I will say engage. For given where I'm coming from.
Should we continue to use them?
Because we cannot do without them.
We can't do without them.
Since 2003, when we have been on the international capital markets, they have always rated us, and every lender worth their salt will not go and invest in any capital market instrument without looking at the rating of the sovereign nation or the economy that they are investing in. It has a direct reflection on whatever return you make in that investment. And so we cannot do without them. And if we cannot do without them, we have to engage them for us to have the true reflection of what is happening. Anybody can tell you, yes, we went to IMF for policy credibility. Are you saying that we can't formulate our own policies that we believe in locally and implement them to get the results? Do we always need the IMF behind us to tell us that your debt levels are unsustainable? We don't need them. Do we need the IMF to tell us that we have to cut down on expenditure before we do? I don't think we need them. We know what our problems are, where our debt levels are, our local mobilization of revenues. It's where we have to look at as a nation. And we keep saying.
You keep saying that, you're saying that we should look at internal, what was the
internal revenue mobilization.
Okay.
Why I say that, Jifa, would they allow me to make a point?
Okay, sure.
Look, the point is that within the sub-region, our peers who run economies similar to us, the Ivory Coast, the Senegals of this, they are doing tax revenue to GDP of between 18 and 20%. Ghana is still doing 12%.
I'm told that's not true, sir.
It is true.
I'm told that's not true, sir. Last week,
I am telling you,
showed me some data. It's not true.
Unless you have something else, that is what I know. That's the data that I've seen over time. And we need to make sure that we improve upon that. And until we improve upon that, we have a cycle.
Okay. I have told you. I know you said I shouldn't interrupt you, but the point is, there's a criticism that the current administration and those of you strong in finance keep talking about revenue mobilization, but you're not talking about cutting expenditure.
We are not just only talking about it. The minister just announced it.
That's only 20% of.
Only 20% is a starting point. We are doing something about our expenses. It is not us just talking, but it's a policy that is in place. So it is not just us saying that we need to improve upon revenues and not doing anything about expenses. I have told you, we are in a regime now where we have cut down our expenses, at least for the quarter, by 20%. So it's not a case of just looking at revenue mobilization, but it's true. It's what the ratings agencies are saying. That is what us to be discussing these issues. They are telling us your debt levels are unsustainable. We know for the economy that we run. But you see, it's also not the case of just Ghana having these issues at this point. Remember, the global economy is coming out of a pandemic situation. All of a sudden, production is ramping up. Funds are going to be scarce because the level of competition is going to go high. It is going to drive interest rates up. And so your rating will matter. And for us to be able to access funding from the international market, either bilateral or whatever.
Why do we want to borrow more money?
Every nation borrows.
Oh, but you've borrowed
and I tell you
more than 200 billion. When you told us that there's money in Ghana, in fact, specifically to quote, the vice president said, I've been at the Bank of Ghana, there is money there, there is no need for us to borrow in this unsustainable and reckless manner.
Pre-pandemic levels, we're bringing our debt to GDP down. Where things were normal, we're growing this economy. Our debt to GDP ratio was coming. It slumped to about 56% at a point. And then we got into this.
That was with the rebase.
That was rebase.
That was rebase. Honorable Lisa, it was rebase.
Economies are rebase. I mean, they are cycles. We are not still running the 1960 base
that we are using. I just want to push that point there.
I think, but you see, for you to jump at it's fine. It's fine. We no economy today in the world will chart figures using the basis of 1960.
But in opposition, you disagreed. You always use
what we are saying is that pre-pandemic
before
levels. Oh, you see, when you were speaking.
Okay, it's
that
okay.
was so
You
quiet
come.
and so
I'll come in,
nice.
I'll
It's
come
okay.
And
Go
I
ahead.
allowed you to
Go
say all
ahead.
that.
Please, Honorable Issa, go ahead.
You see, pre-pandemic levels, we showed that what we're capable. The economy was growing at an average of 7%. We didn't have issues with the rating agencies then. Then we get into the pandemic. Expenses in 2020 alone. See the shift in our revenues. Whilst our revenues fell short by 13 billion, our expenses increased by 12 billion. We are the government that has been faced with very, very critical situations in this country that we have had to deal with. Reform or clean our financial sector. It costs us 21 billion. The security situation in the sub-region today, it's cost us quite a bit of money to be able to make sure that all this insurgents and all that don't infiltrate into our country. So we are not in normal times, and because we are not in normal times, that is why issues like this will come up. Today, I won't sit here and compare our economy to the U.S. economy, but U.S. is experiencing inflation at 1982 levels, 40 years ago. That is where the U.S. economy is, all because we are all coming out of this pandemic. And so Ghanaians should bear with us. All the government is saying today is that let's improve upon our local mobilization of resources. And then we don't have to go and borrow. We don't have to go and borrow like we used to do. Then we can be able to improve our indices, grow our economy, be productive, and ensure that we will not get to this stage again that we have to go back to the IMF cap in hand, begging for them to come and stand behind us with a whip. And at every instance, you have to go there for what our brothers still term policy credibility. A nation like Ghana, a proud nation like Ghana, has to get somebody behind me with a whip telling me what I can or cannot do. That is why when we assumed the reins of governance in 2017, backlog of teachers, trained teachers that should be posted, nurses, and all of that, all because of IMF conditionalities. There are schools who need teachers. But IMF is telling you that government, you cannot grow your payroll. Or you cannot put new people on your payroll, so they cannot be posted. When we have spent money to train them, and there are children in schools waiting to have teachers for instructions. These are some of the things. We are not going back to the IMF.
Okay.
E-levy or no e-levy, but we believe.
I've deliberately tried to stay away from mentioning the e-levy because it's been my topic for the last 2 weeks.
I believe that over time, our brothers will see eye to eye with us
on the e-levy.
Yes, I believe.
Right.
I believe they are patriotic enough.
I won't go there for now.
I believe that they are patriotic enough. In fact, I'm going to. He is a very good friend of the majority leader. He is a very good friend of the majority leader. I am sure that one of these days he is going to toe his line so that we'll be able to get it.
Yeah, I respect him a lot, but he didn't.
Oh, you are his friend.
Yeah,
so let's see what happens.
We are friends. And he's my friend. Yes, the majority leader is my friend, but unfortunately, he didn't invite me to cut the
e-levy cake.
I'm sure you are the person who sent it. In fact, when I saw the cake, he had everything Sweeney written on it.
The man himself has spoken about who sent it.
He has spoken about who sent the cake.
If I could just correct a few misrepresentations.
All right, go ahead.
Misrepresentations.
First of all, it is not correct that Ivory Coast is doing better than Ghana when it comes to tax to GDP ratio. The tax to GDP ratio in Ivory Coast is 13.2%. Ghana is doing 14%. Nigeria, yes, about 12%.
The finance minister said 12%.
Yes, but you see, other projections, other writers, economic writers have put it at 14%. What's it called? Nigeria is doing about 6%.
No. Even the Honorable Okujeto Ablaka, he was here last week.
Yeah.
I think he mentioned that all of these countries that were mentioned, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, they are not doing more than 14%.
Yes, but that's what I'm telling you. I'm telling you, Nigeria is not up to 10%.
Oh.
Nigeria is not up to 10%. You can check it. Listen. So the point that they are doing better than Ghana is not correct. But then again, the hypocrisy in it is that this was the same finance minister with others who marched through the streets, the principal streets of Accra, at a time that they knew the resource envelope and what it could provide, even though they felt that that 12% tax to GDP was a problem. They did not sympathize with the government of the day, but they demonstrated against
the problem
increase
was
in
that
taxes.
The government at the time was
They
condoms
demonstrated
and
they
canvases.
demonstrated
So we
against
didn't
increase in
see
taxes.
any hope.
Even
or
so,
any light at the end of the tunnel.
today when they tell you that our problem is because the tax to GDP, the tax rate to GDP is so low, you ask yourself, when did you find that out? When did you realize that? Why didn't you have the same patience with the government that you march on the streets against for taxing the people? So that lies. I mean, that's where the hypocrisy is. Then again, he says that what the economy we left behind was not sustainable. I'll just quote what Yao Osafo-Maafo said in 2017 after he was appointed senior minister. He said, "We are extremely heavily indebted, but not poor. The economy is fundamentally very strong. It is the management that has been a problem." So at the time, he clearly said that the economy fundamentally that they inherited was strong. And that they were going, and that they were going to bring about an improved management. Jifa. So if you inherited a fundamentally strong economy, but your claim was that the management was poor, how come that your improved management has led to a situation where we have a debt to GDP ratio worse than you took over?
So that's exactly what I'm explaining to you.
How come that the deficit is widening?
So
that's exactly that's why look,
the
we are
non-payment, the delays in paying,
let me tell you something.
all these things.
We are the government that impose the fiscal responsibility act on ourselves to ensure that the deficit does not go beyond 5% pre-pandemic levels.
Jifa, he says that when they took over, public wages, debts, and statutory transfers took about 50% or
100%.
more. That's not true.
100%.
That is clearly not 100%. Then you are left with what?
Nothing. That is why one of the first acts the Southern Parliament passed was a capping law.
That, you see,
to ensure that rigidities within our budget will give government space to make up resources to do things that are important for the government.
As we speak today.
That is why we passed the capping law. You were in Parliament, we were in Parliament together then. You remember? You remember the capping law?
The capping was not passed because there was no revenue to do transfers.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
The capping was passed because to ensure that the finance ministry, as usual, wanted to centralize all the revenue. And that is why many of those institutions today are suffering. All the workers do is to go to warm their seats and go home and take their salaries, because what is left for the institutions to work with is just to pay their salary.
The consolidated fund takes away about 70% of their IGF.
Because you can't manage the economy.
That was the reason. It was
you
not
can't manage
because
the economy when you had no control about the resources that come into the economy.
Can we have
finish off, Honorable Suhini, continue.
You know, so the point has to be made that the economy they inherited was better than the economy that they are presenting us with today, in all aspects of it. And you are a finance person.
That's not true.
Debt to GDP is worse. The deficit is widening. Unemployment is up.
That's not true.
Everything, all the metrics shows that the economy that you inherited was better than the one that you are presenting us with today. And so when these rating agencies confirm what we already know, it is for us to take those ratings and perhaps come back and sit home and look at what we have been doing wrong over the years and how we can correct that. And if we think that there are perhaps other ways that we can better rate ourselves, that is a conversation that we can also have. But the sad part for me is that this government has enjoyed a lot of goodwill and a lot of resources. I spoke about the oil revenue. That's almost double. So
they've enjoyed a lot of resources, all those things
oil
you mentioned.
Yes. In excess of $90.
What do you expect to see? This will be your final
so
comments.
With the advertised better management that they told the people of Ghana they had, one would have expected them to do better with more revenue at their disposal than the government that had less revenue. But the fact is that the economy is worse than it was, despite the fact that they got more revenue and
resources
and
from
resources
the international
and goodwill.
Okay, so let me come to that point, because recently the IMF boss had been speaking about how much monies had been given this administration. More than 450 million had been given to the country for management of COVID. Then I think some more than 200 million for purchase of vaccines and all. And this is even in the pandemic time. So people complain that, and then we got 1 billion as well from the World Bank. So if you say that pre-pandemic we're doing well, everything has been caused because of the pandemic, the administration got so much money during that era, yet you keep blaming everything on pandemic. The view is that we were in trouble before the pandemic. The pandemic only exposed the issues that we already had.
I won't agree with you to say that we're in some difficulty even before the pandemic. It is not right. It is not right to say that we're in difficulty, because all the indicators, all the indices,
the political and
all that indices. Look, even you just mentioned rebasing. Look, even after the rebasing of the economy, the NDC left us with a debt to GDP of 70% after rebasing. That's how bad the economy was.
I thought it was 60. It was 68.
What did he say?
He
68.
Said, yes.
70.
No, it wasn't 70.
I'm telling you 70. You know, there's always
after the rebasing, the debt to GDP, which they had put on the NDC, which the administration, in opposition, the NPP
today, I'll tell you
it was 68%.
I'll tell you that we inherited a national debt of 122 billion.
Yes.
And how much would he say? 120 billion, right?
Why will I say
so what is the
you'll be very
no, but you were talking about debt to GDP after the rebase. It was 68
on us getting revenue. Look, we have done things in this country since we assumed the reins of power in 2017 that could tell you what we have done with these resources. And then they had nothing like free SHS.
Okay, let's not go.
Can you imagine what would have happened to this economy to the 1.3 million students in SHS today? How many of them would have gotten access? Free SHS alone is cost us like 50 billion. We have to clean up our financial sector. The mess they left in that sector that we had to clean up, it's cost us 21 billion.
You see, when you say things like this, you force me to come out.
What is it? I
don't want us to go into a different.
I'm telling you, you are saying that we have gotten revenue. So what have we done?
The point I wanted to make was we spent 20 billion to clean up the financial sector.
21 billion actually.
Okay, to clean up the financial sector. Meanwhile, the monies that were lost, the monies that were lost were not even, it's not up to half of that amount. Now, people who did not even cause that now have to pay a financial services tax to pay for that. So it begs the question: should we have even
was that the only way to deal with a financial?
But you see, you are not asking who caused that.
No, we have questioned this.
You are not asking who caused that.
Those who caused it are the people who worked in the bank who didn't oversee.
They were supervised by the central bank has
collapsing the banks the only way out.
Prosecute those
the banks
people.
Were already collapsed. We didn't collapse.
The issue is
the banks were already collapsed. There were banks which were illiquid. Today we are listening to what's happening in the court of capital.
So final comments from you. You insist that you've done a lot with the resources. If you've done so much with the resources, why is there so much
opposition
to the e-levy, for instance?
The opposition is not unique to Ghana because of the global economic situation we find ourselves in, and Ghana is not an island. Today we are experiencing oil prices in excess of $90. And so if oil prices are going up in Ghana,
shouldn't that be good for us?
But we are net importers.
Shouldn't that be good for government revenue?
We are net importers, so how is that good for us?
Shouldn't that be good for government revenue?
How is that good for us?
The windfall that you are making, why not using it to cushion Ghanaians who are paying high cost of fuel?
For where you sit, it's very easy. Today the price is $90. In times
You
past,
put it
we
at
had
$60.
experienced, and Akufo, in times past, we
Your
experienced
budget,
oil prices at
projection
150.
was $60. So you
How,
have a
where do we
windfall
know?
of
Where do we
$30.
know? Yesterday,
Okay,
I was
so
watching
what-
CNN
so what
when
is-
they said Ukraine situation is getting worse. Who knows
the
where oil
30
prices
so
are
the
going to go to?
windfall we are making, why is it not cushioning
I
the
am saying
prices
that
of fuel?
My point is that today we have $90. We don't know where we're going to be next week. So management of those prices of fuel is something that you need to have some
That's
long-term
why
view
we've
of.
been paying a
Long-term
stabilization
view of.
levy.
So-
you would have thought
so-
that those monies would be
so-
used to cushion.
So we are the government is keeping an eye on it. I am sure and I believe that at appropriate time we'll make the appropriate intervention. But only God knows where oil prices are going. If you look at the projections, it is very scary.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And that's where we have to end it. And my name is Jifa Bampo. You've been watching the Honorable S. Suhini. He's the MP for Tamale. Alasan S. Suhini. I must say the Alasan, eh? Okay. I must say the Alasan S. Suhini. He is the MP for Tamale North and also a member of various committees in Parliament. Also, we've had the Honorable Issa Fuseni, former MP. Okay, Fuseni Issa. Okay. Honorable Fuseni Issa, the former MP for Kaikwe North. Are you going to contest again?
I still think I have.
You still have
something
a
to
fight in
contribute
you.
to, yeah.
All right. So,
to contribute together.
all right. So we'll see how that fight pans out. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming, and we'll be right back after this break.